What's up, guys? It is Chris back with another watch video. Today I am talking about a subject I have not talked about on the channel before. I have been in the watch industry and I've been a collector of watches for my entire life almost, and I've seen a lot of videos on, types of watches, 5 types of watches that you should never buy, 10 reasons why you should never buy this type of watch. And I figured I'd make a video and give you guys my perspective, and I think I have somewhat of a unique perspective on this, on what people should avoid in general when purchasing a watch. And like I said, I think I have a unique perspective, and I'm just going to get right into it. And this came off of the back of a video I recently did on Rolex. A subscriber, Jimmy V, and I were going back and forth, and he was going back and forth with somebody else, having a conversation slash argument. And what came up was a lot of people buy watches that they don't absolutely love. They buy watches for sometimes the wrong reasons. And I buy a watch when I see a watch and I get it in my hands and I say to myself, wow, I need this in my collection. I need to have this watch. It's awesome. And I think a lot of people are influenced by other people, and that is unfortunate. So you should never buy a watch only based on the fact that you think other people will like the watch. You should buy the watch only because you like a watch. And it doesn't matter if it's a $25 used Daniel Wellington or if it's a $50,000 Patek Philippe. You need to buy the watch that's right for you. And that watch might be a Rolex, it might be a Patek Philippe, it might be a Daniel Wellington, it could be anything, a micro brand, it doesn't matter. If you love watches and you find a watch that you absolutely love, then that's the watch for you. And a perfect example is a guy that I watch a lot. His name is Celine Driver, and he loves Zelos. He has so many Zelos in his collection. It's pretty crazy. He has tons of Zelos, and obviously, there's no reason to have so many of one watch except for the fact that you absolutely love them, and that's what he loves Zelos. So more power to him. I really think that's a great thing, and I really enjoy that. And that's the way I am as well. I like to have multiple watches, and I don't like to have all watches from one brand. I like to collect different brands. So that's me. Anyway, it needs to be a watch that you absolutely love. The second reason I would say is you should never buy a watch that is out of your price range. And that sort of ties in with the first reason. You should never buy a watch that's out of your price range. In other words, if you do find a watch and you are absolutely in love with it, never go into debt to buy a watch. It doesn't make sense. Even if you think you're going to make money on that watch, and you should never buy a watch if you think you're going to make money on it. Watches are not an investment. You should buy watches that you like and never ever go into debt for a watch. Only buy a watch that you can afford and never expect anything back from that watch, except for the enjoyment of owning and wearing that watch. Even if it's a watch that you intend never to wear, I've bought watches that I felt maybe too small for my wrist, but I keep them because I absolutely love the watch itself. That's fine too, but never go into debt for a watch that you cannot afford. It doesn't make sense, and you end up paying more money for the watch in the long run, and it's not worth it. If you want to save for a watch, that's one thing, and eventually work your way up. And I'm all about the stepping ladder watch as well. So if you want to buy something like a Zelos or an Omega on your way to the Vacheron, to the Patek, that's completely fine as well. Always buy smart, and that's I don't knock anybody for buying a watch in any sort of channel. So if you buy it from a friend, if you buy it from the gray market, you buy it used, you buy it brand new from an AD, it is completely up to you. Just educate yourself and buy the watch smart. So that brings me to the third watch that you should definitely avoid. And a lot of people have used this in their lists, but I have a slightly different reason why you should not buy a replica watch. Replica watches obviously are not as high quality as the originals. However, The fact is that China, where most replica watches are coming from, have been really working hard to create watches that are almost exact copies of the originals. They've replicated everything down to every screw and nut. Yes, they probably will not last as long as the original. Yes, they probably definitely are not made as well as the original. However, in my opinion, when someone says, oh, they won't last long, that's not the reason why you shouldn't buy one. The reason why you shouldn't buy one is because of the damage it actually does. So a lot of these watches are made illegally, and it doesn't help our economy. It only hurts the economy of Switzerland, because a lot of these watches are getting passed off as real, and there's a lot of stories out there. And what just recently happened with Horology House, and a million other situations. A situation that happened to me when I bought my Black Bay Bronze, and there are tons of replicas out there, and they're really good replicas, and they're being passed off as real. They are hurting the economy. They're hurting the people who are making these real watches, putting a lot of effort. They're hurting brands like the micro brands, the small brands that are up and coming, that are trying to make really good watches. And the fact is that they are not worth the money. If you cannot afford it, comes back to that first one that I said, the first rule about watches that you should avoid. If you can't afford the watch, don't buy the watch. Just buy a watch that you can afford. And that is really definitely a situation that I think that you should avoid, is any sort of replica watch. So the next type of watch that I think you should avoid are Homage watches or Homage watches. So this comes with a caveat, because there are certain watches that are Homage watches or Homage watches that are done right. So if it's a full carbon copy of the original and all they're doing is changing the name on the dial, and a brand that comes to mind like Parnis, who just will take a watch, any Rolex, any Omega, any Panerai in that manner, and they just take the watch, they replicate the watch. It looks almost exactly like the original, except obviously not as well made. And then what they do is they slap their name on it, and that's their watch. And I think that's completely unoriginal, and I don't agree with that at all. However, the other type of homage I'm talking about is something like a Spinnaker. Spinnaker does a couple of different watches that are very much inspired by originals from brands like Omega, like Rolex. And one of their watches that comes to mind is the Damas, which is inspired by vintage Omega divers from the 70s. It has almost the identical case, but they've done a couple of different things with the dials and the hands and the bracelets. It's different enough from the original that it stands out, and you almost look at it and you wish, hey, I wish Omega did this. It's something different. It's something cool. It's not the original watch. It's not a carbon copy. And that's how I feel about homages. I mean, again, it comes back to, if you can't afford the original, don't buy a replica. Don't buy a homage that is an exact copy. Buy something that is inspired by it. However, they've done something a little bit different with it, and it becomes their original style. And I think that's a little bit of I think that's a little bit of a okay homage, in my opinion. Otherwise, a complete replica, a complete carbon copy, I don't agree with, and I say stay away from those. The last watch that I would say stay away from are Franken watches. Now, I'm not saying a recase. Recase watches, I actually do agree with recase watches. If a case is all beat up and they're taking the actual dial and movement and hands and they just put it into a modern or a newer case, or maybe a case that's period correct but not the exact same case that the watch came in, I'm okay with that, because a majority of the watch is what it was. What I'm talking about are these marriage watches that you see on eBay, especially on eBay, and 90% of the watch is not the original watch, and seriously, I think 99% of the watch is completely remanufactured, because they say that they reuse the movements, but 100% of the time almost, the dial is not original, the hands are not original, the case is not original, the crown is not original, obviously the glass is not original, so nothing is original except for what they're saying is the movement. And then sometimes when you look at the movement, it looks like a Unitas, at a movement that was probably decorated or made to look old or whatever they've done. So that's another type of watch that I definitely avoid. When you see those, a lot of them are tempting. Some of them actually look really good. They make them look like trench watches. They put some really cool dials on them, and they are tempting. However, don't take the bait, because these are essentially, coming back to it, they're replica watches. They are not real watches. The dial, in my opinion, is the most important part of a watch. It's the first thing that you will notice next to the case, of course, and then the strap. These are all the face, the what stands out to you when you're looking at a watch. And if it's some watch that was made in Yugoslavia in someone's basement, and they've used a movement that was from an old pocket watch, but the dial itself is just some sort of repainted piece of brass that they've slapped the word Omega on, it's not worth buying it. Do not buy that watch. There are some cool brands like Vortec, I believe their name is, or Vortec, I think, who actually take vintage watches and recase them with hands and well, sometimes they use new hands, but they use dials and movements, but they remanufacture these watches completely, and they're really well made. They have their own specific case that looks really interesting, actually, and that is fine with me. I'm talking about these cheap ones that you find on eBay. Marriage watches, what they call them. They're recased sometimes, and they come up with all different names of what to call them, but in reality, they're just replica watches. Avoid them at all costs. Definitely, if you're buying one of those and you're looking for something that's been recased or retro modded is another word that they use, look for the right watch for you. I bought one that was a Delma, that it had the original hands, the original dial, the original movement, the Venus movement that was in the back. It was just recased into a modern stainless steel that was like a CNC case. Really cool watch, vintage looking chronograph, but it was a recase. So I had that watch for a very long time, and I actually flipped it to buy a different watch. That watch was I guess you could call it a Franken watch. It didn't have the period correct crown or pushers or even the case, but it had a mineral crystal in the back, and you could see the movement. I thought it was cool. But that is a different story. I'm talking about the ones that are essentially replicas, especially when the dial has been redone. It doesn't make any sense. A repainted dial is the most important, and if it's not done by the manufacturer originally, it's not worth the money, in my opinion. Anyway, so that's my 5. Don't buy a watch that you can't afford. Definitely don't buy replica watches. Homage watches are okay under certain circumstances. Franken watches are okay under certain circumstances, but you need to be really careful. And like I said, the dial is the most important. Movement, of course. And don't be influenced by other people. That is probably the biggest message in this whole entire video. Don't be influenced by other people. Buy a watch based on what you like. You need to like the watch. It doesn't matter what other people think. It's the most important thing. Hands down, if you like a watch, it doesn't matter what the price range, who makes the watch, that's the watch for you, then you should buy that watch. If you could afford it and you like it, that's the watch you should be getting. Anyway, if you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Please also add a comment below. I'd like to hear from you guys. Is there anything that you think that I've missed here? I think these are the 5 most important things to me. I'm sure there are plenty of other watches that we should avoid, but these are the 5 most important for myself. And let me know what you guys think. Please add a comment below. I want to hear from you. Please also follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is WatchChrisBlog. Also, I have a bunch of links in the description to watches. Those watches are on Amazon. If you click on those links and you buy one of those watches, I am compensated slightly. It does not cost you any extra. If you use those links and you use one of those links to go to Amazon and buy anything else, I am also compensated by Amazon. And again, it does not cost you anything. You do not need to buy the watch that I've linked to. And it is much appreciated and helps out the channel greatly. Anyway, thank you for logging on, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.